This is the shocking case of Neha Sharma, an Indian bride whose carefully crafted lies unraveled on her wedding day in Toronto. What was supposed to be the happiest moment for Arjun Malhotra and his respected family turned into a scandal of forged degrees, betrayal, and ultimately death. Stay tuned, because in this video we'll uncover how Neha's secret past caught up with her, how the Malhotra family's honor collapsed in front of hundreds of guests, and how the night ended in tragedy. This story has twists at every corner, so don't click away if you want more gripping true crime stories like this. Make sure to support the channel by subscribing and staying active. You won't want to miss what's coming next. In the heart of Toronto's bustling Indian-Canadian community, excitement was building for what many called the wedding of the season. The Malhotra family, respected for their wealth and generosity, had finally announced the marriage of their only son, Arjun. Friends and relatives described him as disciplined, hardworking, and destined for success. His bride-to-be, Neha Sharma, seemed to be the perfect match. She had recently arrived from India, carrying herself with grace and quiet confidence. Every time she walked into a room, her poise captured attention. What impressed people most was her claim of being a qualified doctor, a graduate of a prestigious medical school in India. To the families around them, Neha embodied achievement, ambition, and elegance. Many believed Arjun was fortunate to find a partner who not only came from a good background but also had professional accomplishments of her own. The engagement had been celebrated with grandeur. Neha spoke warmly about her plans to build a career in Canada, and relatives eagerly discussed how the couple would become a symbol of success in the community. Every conversation about the wedding carried a sense of pride. The Malhotras were relieved to see their son settle with someone so admired, while Neha's relatives boasted about her intelligence and hard work. The wedding preparations moved quickly, with elaborate decorations ordered, expensive outfits tailored, and hundreds of guests invited. Behind the scenes, there was an almost competitive spirit, as each side tried to outdo the other in hospitality. On the surface, everything looked perfect. Guests whispered about how well-suited the pair seemed. Neha's charm and her stories of long nights in medical school added to her aura. The Malhotras, trusting her completely, saw no reason to question her background. For them, this was the beginning of a lifelong partnership built on respect, status, and prosperity. As the wedding preparations gathered momentum, the Malhotra household buzzed with energy. Relatives flew in from different cities, vendors lined up deliveries, and the family spared no expense to ensure everything was flawless. Yet, beneath the layers of excitement, a quiet unease began to take shape. It started with Arjun's cousin, Vikram, who worked as a junior doctor in Toronto. He had been impressed by Neha's claim of having completed a medical degree in India, but something about her story struck him as inconsistent. She spoke vaguely about her college, often changing small details when asked about professors or internships. At first, he dismissed it as the nervousness of someone adjusting to a new country. But as he observed her more closely, the doubts deepened. Driven by curiosity, Vikram searched through Canadian medical registries to check whether Neha had applied for licensing exams. Strangely, there was no record of her name. He then turned to Indian medical directories, hoping to find at least a trace of her credentials. Once again, his search came up empty. The university she claimed to attend did exist, but the official records available online did not list her among recent graduates. Vikram felt uneasy but struggled with the thought of raising such concerns during wedding preparations. He knew his family's reputation was at stake, and the Malhotras had already invested heavily in the event. Still, the more he looked, the stranger things appeared. Some of the documents Neha casually showed relatives seemed overly polished, the seals and signatures slightly blurred. The paper appeared newer than one would expect for official transcripts. When Vikram quietly mentioned his suspicions to a trusted friend, the response was immediate: something doesn't add up. Despite his hesitation, he realized the family deserved to know the truth before it was too late. The wedding day arrived with all the grandeur expected of a family like the Malhotras. The banquet hall glittered with lights, floral arrangements filled the air with fragrance, and hundreds of guests in colorful attire gathered to witness what was supposed to be a joyous union. Music played, photographers captured every detail, and the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Arjun, dressed in a regal sherwani, stood at the center of attention, while Neha, adorned in heavy jewelry and a bridal lehenga, looked every bit the part of a celebrated bride. Smiles and blessings surrounded them, yet an undercurrent of tension rippled quietly through the room. Vikram, carrying the weight of his discoveries, had chosen not to remain silent. That morning, an envelope containing documents had been delivered anonymously to the Malhotra family. Inside were copies of Neha's supposed degree certificates, alongside evidence that they were forged. The papers detailed mismatched registration numbers, incorrect formatting, and even a seal traced back to a known forgery racket in India. The revelation spread through the wedding hall like wildfire. Guests whispered, faces stiffened, and confusion filled the air. The Malhotras, stunned and humiliated, halted the rituals just as the priest prepared to begin. Arjun stood frozen, staring at the documents that stripped away the carefully woven image of his bride. The crowd's admiration for Neha evaporated in seconds, replaced by judgment and disbelief. Some guests quietly left, unwilling to be part of the unfolding scandal. Others stayed, eager to witness the drama unfold. Neha's once confident demeanor crumbled. Her carefully built reputation, crafted over months of storytelling, shattered in front of hundreds of eyes. The hall, which moments earlier echoed with celebration, descended into chaos. What was meant to be the happiest day of two families became the moment everything unraveled. As the shock of the wedding day rippled through the community, deeper truths about Neha's past began to surface. What initially appeared to be an isolated case of dishonesty soon revealed itself as part of a larger pattern. Investigators and relatives digging into her background discovered that Neha had been weaving lies long before she ever set foot in Canada. In India, she had carefully cultivated the image of a highly educated, independent woman, presenting forged documents as proof of her accomplishments. These papers were used to impress wealthy families, particularly those searching for suitable matches for their sons. Each time, she positioned herself as the perfect candidate, ambitious, respectable, and modern. In reality, Neha never completed higher education. She had worked briefly at odd jobs, all while struggling under heavy financial pressure and personal debt. To escape her circumstances, she turned to deception, finding vulnerable families who were eager to believe in her polished facade. Some of her schemes ended with broken engagements, often after she secured gifts, jewelry, or financial assistance under the pretext of dowry arrangements. In a few cases, she vanished entirely, leaving behind families too embarrassed to report what had happened. Shame and fear of public humiliation kept many silent, allowing her to continue her cycle unchecked. By the time she met Arjun and the Malhotras, Neha had already reinvented herself multiple times. Canada represented not just a marriage, but a permanent escape, a way to secure residency and build a new life far removed from her past misdeeds. What she underestimated was the scrutiny she would face in a more connected world, where records could be traced and lies could unravel swiftly. The carefully constructed life story that once deceived many now stood exposed, piece by piece, under an unforgiving light. The aftermath of the halted ceremony was nothing short of catastrophic for both families, but the Malhotras bore the brunt of the humiliation. Guests who had once praised their hospitality now whispered about betrayal and disgrace. Relatives who had flown in from abroad demanded explanations, while elders shook their heads in disbelief. The shame of being deceived on such a public stage cut deep, and the family's anger quickly shifted toward Neha. For them, this was not just a personal betrayal but a stain on their reputation within the community. Every glance, every whisper in the hall felt like salt in an open wound. Inside the banquet hall, emotions spiraled out of control. Neha was confronted by relatives who accused her of destroying their honor. Some demanded she leave immediately, but others refused to let her walk away so easily. Voices rose, accusations were hurled, and what began as a confrontation turned into a heated spectacle in front of lingering guests. The groom's father, overwhelmed by the chaos and stress, collapsed onto a chair, his chest heaving as relatives rushed to his side. The air that was once filled with music and laughter now vibrated with anger, disbelief, and fear. Neha, trapped in the center of it all, tried desperately to defend herself, but no explanation could undo the damage. Every attempt to justify her actions only fueled the outrage. Her glamorous bridal attire now felt like a cruel disguise, her jewelry and finery serving as stark reminders of the deception. Attempts by a few relatives to calm the situation failed as emotions overpowered reason. The Malhotras debated whether to call the police immediately or handle the matter quietly, fearful of further scandal. With nowhere to run, Neha stood surrounded by resentment, her carefully built image crumbling into something far darker. That night, after the guests had dispersed and the once celebratory banquet hall lay in eerie silence, the scandal reached its darkest point. Neha had been moved to a small guest room within the venue, guarded by a few relatives who feared she might flee before the authorities arrived. Tension lingered in the air, thick with unspoken rage and humiliation. For hours, heated discussions echoed in nearby corridors as family members argued over how to proceed. Some pressed for immediate police involvement, while others insisted on keeping the matter contained to avoid further disgrace. In the middle of it all, Neha sat alone, stripped of her confidence, her elaborate bridal attire now heavy with shame. When the sun rose the next morning, a horrifying discovery shattered the fragile silence. Neha's lifeless body was found sprawled across the floor of the guest room. Blood pooled beneath her head, the result of a violent blow. At first glance, whispers spread that she might have taken her own life, overwhelmed by humiliation. But the details told a different story. The wounds were inconsistent with a fall, and the forensic team quickly confirmed it was not an accident. Someone had struck her with deliberate force. Panic rippled through the family. Overnight, the scandal had transformed into a potential murder investigation. Everyone present at the wedding became a suspect. Dozens had reasons: anger, betrayal, or a desperate need to silence her before the story spread further. The Malhotras were at the center of suspicion, their reputation now in even greater peril. Rumors spread that the killing was an act of revenge, a way to reclaim honor through violence. The truth, however, remained buried beneath layers of fear and silence, leaving behind only speculation and suspicion. The wedding that had collapsed in shame now stood as the scene of a shocking crime. The investigation into Neha's death dragged on for months, but answers never came easily. Police questioned dozens of guests, combed through evidence, and pressed the Malhotras for cooperation. Yet every path seemed to end in silence. The family, once open and admired in their community, became guarded and distant. Their lawyers advised them to say little, and relatives who might have known more refused to speak. The coroner's report confirmed what many already suspected: Neha's injuries were consistent with homicide, not accident. Still, with no clear witness and no one willing to admit involvement, the case stalled. Speculation filled the void left by the lack of closure. Some whispered that a relative, overcome with rage, had lashed out in the heat of the moment. Others believed it was a calculated act, planned quietly to ensure Neha never had the chance to ruin the family further with legal battles or public shame. A darker theory suggested that more than one person was involved, that the act had been quietly agreed upon during the heated arguments of that fateful night. But without evidence, every theory remained just that: speculation. The authorities eventually labeled the case unresolved, and Neha's death was recorded with an ambiguous note: "cause undetermined." For the Malhotras, the scandal faded from newspapers but never from memory. In community gatherings, the story lived on in hushed tones, a warning wrapped in mystery. To some, Neha was seen as a con artist who finally met consequences for her lies. To others, she was a young woman whose ambition and desperation led her into dangerous territory. Years later, the truth remained hidden. Justice, if it ever came, happened behind closed doors, in whispers no one would confirm. The wedding that promised a new beginning ended only in silence, suspicion, and death.